Neck-throughs, guitars, they're like a guy that you won't have a beer with you.
I want to hear what's pushing the notes.
Freddie King and B.B. King, Albert King, and let's not forget Burger King.
I don't want to blow my knuckle out.
Stainless steel is the work of the devil.
These go to 11.
From the East Amplification Tone Labs in Baltimore, Maryland, it's the Amps and Axes Show. With your hosts, Jeff the Godfather of Low Wattage Amps Bober and Mick Marcelino.
Well, good day to you, Mr. Bober.
Good day to you, Mr. Marcelino. How be you?
Oh, we are just doing great. The fans, you guys are just kicking it. We can't thank you enough.
Yeah, thank you so much, and you know we can't do it without you.
That's right, and make sure that if you tell anybody, tell them that you heard it here first.
That's right, because you probably will, and most likely it will be interesting.
Especially today's.
Today is if you're one of the people that write us and say we want a technical show, you hit the jackpot today. So we're going to take a pause for the cause. Be right back with our guest of the week, Mr. Frank Falbo.
Hi, this is Richie Kotzen. You are listening to Amps and Axes.
Hi there, this is Matt Wakeling, host of the Guitar Speak podcast, a weekly show produced in Sydney, Australia, interviewing leading guitarists, luthiers and gear builders from Australia and all around the world. We're into all sorts of styles, all sorts of gear, so if you love the guitar, why not look us up on iTunes or Stitcher and join thousands of listeners around the world who tune in to the Guitar Speak podcast.
Okay, and we are back as promised with our guest of the week, Mr. Frank Falbo. Frank, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great.
Excellent, excellent. Good to speak with you.
Yeah.
From where are you, in the San Francisco area?
No, I'm down in Ventura. So it's like maybe an hour and a half north of LA.
Oh, okay.
Just close enough to get there when I have to get there, and just far enough not to be
there.
LA.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's perfect. That is actually perfect.
Yeah.
So
well,
yeah,
what I wanted to say is Frank reached out to us, and that happens every now and then. And I was like, well, you know what? I'll go over and I'll check out his stuff because, I can't. I've surfed the internet, but I haven't reached the entire internet. Right. So
there's a couple of corners.
There's a couple areas, and I'm looking at these pieces of art that he calls acoustic guitars, and I'm like, well, we definitely have to get him on the show. You know.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, these things are really, really amazing looking, and of course we got a ton of questions, but of course Jeff does his thing, and then I'll ask some questions.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So. I'm, I don't know, Frank, if you're familiar with the show, but I'd like to take people in the Wayback Machine and find out, where you were born and raised and what got you into music and how you wound up where you are now. So, it's history time. Give us a little history.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's I'm from the Chicagoland area, so I know what a good pizza tastes like.
Nice.
And I was
well,
there.
you know what? For us New York guys, that's debatable.
Yeah, well, you know what? Given time, even you can be educated. But no, it's all good. The funny thing about the Chicago area is when every time someone says Chicago is the best for pizza or whatever, it's because there's all the styles there too. It's not just that deep dish Chicago thing that's huge. That weighs 500 pounds. The upside down pizza. It's, there's a lot of good pies over there, but I digress. So I grew up, and then my family was in the Italian cheese business, right? So you can imagine I was around, some whole milk mozzarella as I was growing up.
Nice.
Yeah, the good stuff. Yeah, Falbo cheese. And so that's where I'm from, and I was there all the way until I came here to Ventura to work for Seymour Duncan. They're up in Santa Barbara. But I've been playing guitar my whole life since I was 8. I've been taking things apart. I was leveling frets when I was 12 years old, I take my, strings off the guitar and do fun stuff and comb through the Stuart McDonald catalog and, try to learn everything. I just went Rain Man on it early.
Wow.
And so there's a lot of things I'm not good at. I can't dunk a basketball, and I don't have a PhD after my name, but I jumped into both feet.
It's so funny that you say, at 12 years old, you were leveling frets. And like at 12 years old, I was making noise from some instruments. At that point, I think probably more so drums than guitar, but it's always back and forth. But at that point, I don't know that I knew enough to know that there was something wrong. You know what I mean? Let alone try to fix it.
Yep. Yeah.
That's pretty
I just
crazy.
geeked out over it so hard that I ended up, like I said, I would end up looking through the StewMac catalog and, reading the books on how to build a guitar. Everything comes from just breaking things down and taking it apart. If the clock radio disc stopped working, you opened it up, and you looked inside and you said, which is the part that isn't doing its thing? And then you replace it. And so that's just how my brain works, but like I said, at the same time, there's no PhD after my name. I don't have the education, like some people do. So, I'm kind of, I kind of have to come at it from both sides. Yeah, it really does. You're right.
It only goes so far. Yeah. After that, there's practicality has to come into play. Experience, practicality, desire of, filling a niche, all these things come after some kind of education, but they can also come without a formal education if you're obviously smart like you are.
Well, thanks, man. No, the truth is you have to be able to apply this stuff. So, I can't tell you how many discussions I've had with an engineer or somebody, with those degrees after their name saying it is impossible that this thing that you're talking about is happening. When you move this wire over here, or if you wire this up like this, or if you have this magnet like this, no, I'm sorry, it's impossible. It is below the threshold of human hearing. There's no chance that what you just said is making any difference. And what invariable ends up happening is after enough time and study on their part of me pointing out why something's happening, they go, well, okay, I understand what's happening now, But the book knowledge on the front end didn't get them there.
Right.
Right. So they have to back it. I mean, you make amps and stuff like that. You know how this works. Bend this resistor sideways, this capacitor. But you can't put this capacitor too close to that. Well, but the book says I can. Yeah, I know. I know. But when they crank this thing up to 10 and you plug in your Les Paul, this happens,
Right.
And we don't want this to happen, so you have to move this, And same thing holds true for guitars. They're made of wood. How many times could you sit with somebody who says, the physics of this don't make any sense? And I say, I know, I understand. But when I take this guitar out of the hot car and I bring it into the air-conditioned, venue, then this is what happens, you guys. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And so it just depends on who you're talking to, I've had my share of, like I said, discussions with the engineers over my lifetime, but I'm in a nice place right now where I get to kind of walk into a place that has my name on the door, and then I'm working with a lot of other really great companies on some fun stuff.
Well, there's a lot of YouTube videos of guys that actually do the math, and they start laying down all this, all this very precise, very technical. This is what happens. This is why, your Les Paul has no difference than this guitar, if it had humbuckers and all this weirdness, and then you listen and you go, well, if I just take the same amp and I'm plugging 5 different guitars into it, depending upon, I guess, and we've talked about this, Jeff, is where the gain level is. Right. If it's just a switch, well, then it's just going to sound like that. But if it's actually got, some harmonic function that's going on in there, you can definitely hear the difference. But of course, there's so many naysayers that have, their slide rules, and it's like,
that's right. My favorite is, you can't, a pickup only hears magnetically, and I'm thinking, but do you have any understanding of what it is hearing magnetically? It's amazing, so back to, so Illinois, right? So I leave Illinois because after about 10 years of not being in the business, I came up with the P-Rails pickups, and I was talking to Seymour Duncan about licensing to them. And at the same time, their new products guy left. So I said, all right, well, if it's meant to be, then so be it. So I submitted my resume, ended up going for the interview, and they moved me and my family out here to sunny California. So I was there for, about 6 years. I was vice president of product development, sometimes VP of sales at the same time. And we came up with a bunch of stuff there. But that's how I get out of the city with the best, food in the nation, right? Is to go to work for Seymour Duncan.
Right.
But yeah, when you start talking about pickup stuff, I mean, it's outrageous. What a pickup can sense on an instrument, this amount of information that a string can carry in it, I mean, if a string wasn't that sensitive, how is it that, Stevie Ray Vaughan could play a guitar and then you and I could pick up the rig and it doesn't sound the same? Now we're talking about finger skin. Do you know what I mean? We're talking about the way that somebody attacks the string, if they have their pick on an angle or straight up and down.
Exactly.
Now, all this stuff matters. And so the fact that a string is that sensitive, that it can tell the difference in the, for lack of a better word, the DNA of its driver, means that, yes, if the string can tell the difference whether it has mahogany on the other end of it or whether it has, a slab of swamp ash on the other end of it. And then it's these pickups jobs to kind of sense it, and be able to interpolate it. But, to go back to what you were saying, Mick, about, just what can affect what, by the time you go into an amp, you introduce sound pressure level. So now you're standing in front of an amp that's blasting back at you the signal that you're giving to it, which means any humps and resonances and any wolf tones and any dead spots and any whatever, all that stuff's being driven by the sound pressure in the air. So now this, you know what I mean? Like if you have a mid-rangey body, well, then in front of the amp, it's even more mid-rangey. And so as we get into this modeling world where sometimes people go front to back, they record a track without ever hitting the air, right? They record a full track by going into a rig. There's literally no sound in the air because they have their cans on,
Right.
Then, you could argue that it makes a little bit less of a difference because I don't have an external SPL coming in and punching up that guitar.
Very true.
And augmenting its
it does make less of a difference, but on the other side of that coin, it also doesn't do what happens when you actually do move the air and you do those things do interact. So that can't happen anymore.
That's right. And sometimes those are, as much as they are multipliers of what's happening in the guitar, as much as sometimes those are also homogenizers. Sometimes plugging into that PV solid state 2x12 that you have and cranking it up to 9.
I don't have one of those.
No, I know.
I don't have
one. I say you as with my finger pointed at whoever's listening right now to this podcast. You put that on with the stereo chorus, where the one channel's vibratoing and the other one isn't, and now all of a sudden it's like, okay, there's a degree of pancake syrup, that lays over the top of everything. It's kind of obfuscates the some of the characteristics, but I digress. We could beat this.
I want to digress for a second because you said, and then I invented the P rails, and that just came out of nowhere. So I want to go back to that for a minute. It's like, okay, how did that happen? How did you get there? You didn't wake up one morning and go, I'm going to wind up pick up and call it a P rail, and then see what's going to be interesting. So what were you doing before you invented that?
I kind of did, but no. So I was out of the business for like 8 or 10 to 9 years, where I handled like finance and investments. I totally had the real job, went and just handled retirement plans and did all this stuff. And
what were you doing before that? You said you were out of the business.
So before that, I was with a company called Westheimer Corporation for a while. And they were like the central USA headquarters of the Cortec factory that was in Korea. So that's the place that builds like, I don't say ghost build because they don't try to keep it quiet, but they would build all those Ibanez's and the Epiphones or whatever else. They were the factory that built all the stuff for these brands, right?
Yeah.
Now they're in Indonesia. They moved the factory, and again, so they're doing all the Ibanez stuff there, and a whole host of other brands. So I worked for them for a while. They had Mighty Mite guitar parts too. And so I did that, but then I was in a shop. I was in a store in Illinois where I just ran building. I built guitars and did repairs out of there for a few years before it was time to get the real job. And so some of my inventions came even back all the way back. So I want to say during that time, was when I came up with the intention bridge design. Even it was back that far ago for the acoustics that we're talking about.
Wow.
When was this?
This would have been 90s. So yeah, like early mid 90s. And so yeah, but being out of the business doesn't mean you're out, right? I mean, I had my whole garage shop and I kept making guitars.
You're never out.
No, you're never out.
Right.
So I would keep building things or whatever. But a lot of these ideas, they come from, when it comes to product development, you guys probably know this. You can put out a market survey that says, what does everybody want? Does everyone want dark blue jeans? You know what I mean? And take a poll. But to be able to read between the lines, to read somebody somewhere that goes, what would be cool is a humbucker that splits to like the sound of a P90. Then you look around and you see everybody's attempt at something like that, which would be some weird double blade thing or something with Alnico poles on half of it. You know what I mean? Just they all had some kind of a synthetic version of it. And I was like looking at it. I'm like, you know what? The geometry is there. I can make this work. And so if you inside the P-rails, if you look, there's a lot of stuff that you don't notice, but you notice it. Just the distance of the P90 from the top of the thing versus where the rail is versus where the magnets are underneath, how that whole magnetic circuit interfaces, so that I am powering the blade of the rail at the same time as the P90, and I'm doing the P90 in the right way. A lot of these guys would do it. They would approach it by just taking two little ceramic magnets and making a fake single coil P90 thing, and they'd say, well, I got you 80% of the way there. What do you want? What else do you want?
Yeah, because the P-rail, the P90 part of it is larger than the single coil part.
It's huge. Yeah, it's totally legit. It's full,
so it's like a real P90.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a limitation to how much wire you can fit on it before it will not fit in the humbucker cavity anymore. And we basically reached that limit. I mean, I had discussions with the engineers. They were like, well, we got to put a cover on it to protect it. I'm like, you can't put a cover on it. You're going to lose 200 turns. It's like it's to its limit, and that's why there's only room for like one wrap of tape around the outside.
Wow,
that's wild.
But that was the idea. Yeah, that was the idea, was to get there. And so I would say we got there. I mean, the DC resistance on the neck one is 7 point something K, on the P90 itself. I mean, that's right in there. Everybody else's P90 attempt in a humbucker box, it falls short. They got to go up a wire gauge, and then all of a sudden the whole recipe changes again. Because they got to change wire gauges to get enough DCR to get some output out of it. So now everything's wrong. The resonant peak is wrong. The shape of it. You know what I mean? The coil geometry. Everything goes out the window when you do that. So that was my labor of love. So yeah, I was talking to Duncan about licensing, and then they did. We did all those things at once. I went out there and worked for them, and they licensed the design, and they make it today, and it turned out to be, luckily, pretty successful.
Were you at that time when you were developing this? Were you playing out and like road testing these things in your guitars and changing the recipe a few times?
Yeah, I would make the prototypes, but the nice thing about the recipe with P-rails was you're limited by the form factor, right? And so the recipe is the maximum amount of turns on the P90 to create the P90 sound. Mm-hmm. Once that is achieved, then because like I said, you have space limitations. I have P-rail prototypes with hacked up mounting rings. You know what I mean? Like where I went for the full boat P90 turns, right? Or a P-rail prototype, that doesn't use a mounting ring, where you have to just, you'd have to make a guitar around it. But we got there, we got to where we needed to be. But so once that's dictated, then everything else kind of comes off of that, right? Once you knew what that was, then all your other relationships can fall into play just using, logic and understanding.
And it's go ahead.
No, I was going to say, if you want this to be a drop-in piece, you have there are certain parameters that you need to adhere to. Sure.
Yeah, so you work within it. It's like saying something has to be a 1x12 combo. Okay, so starting there, now what does that mean? Well, it means I can't use a Russian, like an old tube that's 13 inches long. Do you know what I mean? Like I can't, you know, so I have that limitation. All right.
Wait, that gives me an idea.
Right. But yeah, it's just that, you know, it's that kind of a thing. You know, if one of your parameters was you have to design a guitar that fits into a small overhead bin in an airplane, I'd say, okay, that's great. Can it be a 12-string? No, it can't be a 12-string. You know what I mean? Like, there's too much headstock. Come on. You know?
Exactly.
So yeah, there's some limitations.
Need to live within reality.
Yeah, come on, man.
And you know, to talk about the actual P-rail and what it does, that was a really cool design because they made switches that went on the mounting ring, right?
Yeah, that came second, but that's another Chicago guy that invented that, Jamie Shane. He was in Canned Heat, you know, yeah. So he was pocket knifing mounting rings like in the 70s. And so it wasn't until, I mean, one thing was the P-rails where we said, look, this should happen, you know, these two things should be able to go together. But the other thing was switch technology. So these little E-switches now, they're rated at 10,000 cycles, you know, and it was like, all right, well, technology finally caught up. You know, you can't it's not a turn signal switch you could put in the monitor. You know, I mean, you have to be able to design something that's ergonomic, that's elegant, that can stand up, you know, to the abuse. And so it was really a perfect storm that came along at just the same time. That's cool. Where it was like we finally looked into it, and like I said, you can't get the off-brand one. You got to get the E-switch. You know, you can't get the you know what I mean. But you could make a switch that would go on a guitar that again would stand up. You know, obviously he couldn't. He never molded anything, you know, but we were able to mold a mounting ring that has those little, you know, thumb and finger divots in it, right? So, you know, just to make it a little bit more, you know, like I said, more marketable. It's something that probably Duncan couldn't have come out with 5 years prior. And it's just a perfect storm.
And you can get the P-rail. I think it could be. I could be wrong, but Godin guitars. They offered that on their Les Paul type guitar for a while there.
Yeah, you can. There's a lot of different. ESP launched it in the Potbelly when they did it, but you can find them out there. You just got to kind of look. But
yeah,
but yeah, no, it was good. I mean, I want to say sales were. I mean, the first year sales were basically 5 times
cool.
what was predicted. You know what I mean? It was like so. It was the numbers were good. It was, and you got to worry about that. Just same thing as I do with my guitars, right? It's a little nerdy. You know, and you gotta, you know, there's always this, you know, sort of hesitation. You know, what is this going to break in and be mainstream, or is it going to stay within the Geek Squad? You know, and so the numbers were such that the P-rails did break out. You know, there's a lot of people who have adopted that one. So you know, we I don't know if you want to say we lucked out, but
I think it's a great idea, and it's Thanks, something. Man. Oh, it's fantastic, and it really is something that, you know, people would want, and to find one that's done right, it's even, you know, a bigger joy, because, you know, I'd like to have something that sounds like a P90, because that's such a it's a Strat on steroids, you know, and it's got this bigness to it and this clarity, and then I want a humbucker at the same time, you know, it's just, when I flip the switch,
right?
Yeah.
You get that world,
that's
man.
The thing. Yeah, you put the rails on, and if you're in the in-between position, it is very stratty. I mean, granted, it is never, you know, when we launched it, we were careful, you know, we didn't want to make like snake oil claims, you know what I mean? We weren't like, this will do it all, and it'll, you know, it'll iron your shirts. You know, it's like, look, it's close to a single coil sound. You know what I mean? No one's sitting here telling you that you can throw your, you know, custom shop Strat in a garbage can and tour with, you know, with P-rails only, right? But the point is, it's there, and you use it. You know what I mean? It's extremely usable, you know. But it's the P90 authenticity, and then the humbucker tones, obviously, because now that you have sort of the woofer and tweeter as you're making the humbucker sound, the humbucker tones were really good. They're really broad ranged. You know, that a nice wide resonant peak from
and I would imagine that the coils are I would think imbalanced, right?
Totally.
Unbalanced.
Totally disparate. Yeah, on purpose, and that's what happens.
That's what a lot of people have found out over the past few years. It's like, okay, the really good sounding ones, the coils are like humbuckers. The coils are unbalanced.
So
people started purposely making them that way to get the sound that they were been searching for.
Yeah, it widens out the resonant peak, and it can introduce a little bit of hum, but again, it's not really that big of a deal. But the reason why people go to that is because if you have two coils that are identical, you have one strong resonant peak, and then the imbalance sort of gives this perception of a wider frequency response. It spreads out the peak, and all these other tips and tricks too. Like scatter winding, for example. A similar thing. It broadens out the peak. It opens things up. So if you think of like the most rigid and traditionally wound pickup, where there's literally as many layers of turns as there are the thickness of that wire before it switches direction and goes the other way. Sort of like some transformers will be wound that way, right? Just wound to perfection. That's basically, for lack of a better way to explain it, that's the most wah pedal that you can be, right? In other words, you have the most rigid and distinct resonance, and resonant peak, and then all these other tricks, and we don't like that, because it's too characterized. So all these other things that we do to try to get a pickup to be a little bit more open, to relax a little bit, to have more dynamic range, yada yada, all those things are sort of like broadening out the peak and extending out the frequency response. And they all do it in different ways, right? Thicker insulation on the wire will do it. More air in the coil from scattering. More air in the coil from just fewer turns per layer. All those things will sort of give you that, but they do it in a different way than one another. Which is, I'm not trying to segue into Fishman, but that's why by the time when I brought the Fluence technology over to Fishman, that is just like, for me, that's kid in a candy store. That's like the pinnacle for me.
That's very cool.
Oh yeah,
because it erases all that stuff. It just basically erases how. I mean, you guys have heard Richie talk about it, but it erases how everything that you would do on a pickup would have some other negative side effect. You're like, I want to do this. Oh, that's great. And then how there's three things that happen that were bad, and it's all a balancing act, But when I'm sitting down with Fluence, doing a voicing session or whatever, it's like I just pick from the menu. You know what I mean? You want to combine chocolate and peanut butter? Go ahead. You want to combine chocolate and arugula? Like, I can do that too. I don't know if you'll like it, but I can do it. Yeah, exactly. But so that's talking about freeing. Holy smokes,
Yeah.
But I digress.
Wow.
But yeah, so that's my history. So when I left Duncan, it was part and parcel. I brought the Fluence tech over to Fishman, and then at the same time started Falbo Designs. And Falbo Guitars is the the guitars that I make.
That's
well,
cool.
Let's hear some about those now. Cause,
sure.
I'm sure you use some form of pickup that you've designed in them, but let's talk more about the other aspects of the guitar.
Yeah,
that crazy bridge to start off with.
Yeah, I mean, it started with the bridge. If there's no way I would have started a guitar company to say I choose the finest piece of rosewood and my fretwork is the best. It's like there are 1,000 people who have the best fretwork and the best paint jobs and the best choices of woods, and climb to the top of a mountain to pull a tree off of the edge of a waterfall, right? It's like that exists already. So the bridge design I've had, like I said, for a really long time. That was actually written into a technology agreement with Duncan. So it predates Duncan by a wide margin, but it was like the P rails and some other stuff. We had there's agreements, right? Anytime you work for a company, if you design something, they own it, and that makes sense. I have no, there's nothing wrong with that. But then we had this whole litany of the things that I had designed before I started working for them, and this bridge design was one of them. And so really, if I was going to develop that, I also I would have had to have left. There wasn't they had right of first refusal on anything that I had, and so if I wanted to see that come to fruition, I had to leave. And so between that and then being aware of this, technology that became the Fluence pickups, it was time. So the acoustic bridge, okay, so everything is predicated upon this intention bridge, where on an acoustic, you string up a guitar and the strings torque the bridge forward. In other words, if you had no bracing on the guitar top, the strings would just explode the bridge right off the top of the guitar.
Yeah, sure.
Because the spruce can't handle it.
No, it can't.
So the bracing Yeah, so the bracing is in there to stop that from happening, right? How do we stop this? Oh my gosh, well, how about wood and glue? Okay, add more wood and glue, and then it'll stop it. But, that's at the detriment of the vibration. So I don't want to add too much wood and glue, so there's your conundrum, right?
Yeah.
And so what I did...
And that's why you have different bracing configurations.
X-bracing.
Everybody wants to try their own design to see how it sounds, but they're all needed for that reason.
Yes, exactly. And some are better than others, and some are highly voiced, and some are super flat sounding and boring, and some choke the guitar off, and etc. But all of them really, without criticizing anybody's bracing pattern at all of them represent some kind of a voice. Where that guitar maker said, "I'm done. I think this sounds good now." But they all had to do that with their level of compromise. Kind of like the same thing with pickups. I'm going to do this, but then it's going to choke off the sustain. I'm going to do this to get more treble, but it's going to do that. And the biggest trade-offs are really just in the dynamic range. If I underbrace a guitar so it's phenomenal when you finger pick it, it's going to overload when you hit it hard. It's going to kerrang, right? And if I play like a typical Martin-style guitar, one that's not braced extra thin, but one that's braced sort of the way their factory guitars are braced, it takes a lot to get them going. If you finger pick them very softly, then they're kind of like, they don't really want to make a sound yet. So you got to dig into them a little bit. Yeah, so you got to dig into it, and then you get your sound. Okay, fine. Some other guitars like a Taylor or whatever, some are built for speed. You know what I mean? There's just make it easy for me to play, make the sound kind of even and balanced, and we'll go from there. Breedlove has a cool design. They use that Bridge Doctor that was designed about 30 years ago or so that pushes against the back of the guitar to push the bridge back in the other direction.
What do you think
it's
of
a choke at that point?
What do you think of Babbitt's?
Yeah, again, another way of approaching it where he brought the tension out to the outside of the guitar.
Yeah.
So the Babbitt's bridge, to me, when you play one, has the sound of more similar to a trapeze tailpiece, because he's not driving. He actually has to go down under and then over to create his motor, to create his torque.
Yeah.
Because otherwise the strings don't pull down on the saddle, right?
And it looks very weird on the guitar, by the way.
It's a harp. Yeah, it's a
that thing's fanned out,
Yeah.
It is, I know. Yeah. But he's a smart guy, and he did a thing. And so if you play that guitar and you like that guitar, then that's your thing.
Yeah.
But so all these guys have tried to take a crack at this, at trying to manage it, but it always involved touching off somewhere else too. Like I'm going to leverage somewhere else. So it's like a teeter-totter. I got to put that 200-pound gorilla on one side, and so that I can balance the 200-pound gorilla on the other side.
Yeah.
With me, I'm saying, what if you would just move the 200-pound gorilla to the middle of the teeter-totter? I'm taking the string tension itself and using it to undo the forward torque. I'm actually imparting negative torque on the top. So from the middle of the acoustic guitar, I'm essentially torque neutral. Now I can dial that back and forth a little bit for sound, but I'm essentially torque neutral, or within 10, 20%, something like that, depending on the guitar. And I'm driving the top of the guitar from the center out, like a speaker motor, like a drum head being struck in the center. And when you do that, you take away a lot of this comb filtering that basically just destroys sustain, and it destroys sort of the acoustic guitar's ability to communicate all up and down the fingerboard. It's not to say that you take the voice away. I didn't make it sound like a, like Line 6's sample of a Dreadnought. It's quite the opposite. It translates more information. So the way you pick it, the way, you know what I mean? And the different body sizes, of course, make a big difference, right? So, a small parlor-sized guitar sounds different than my gigantic jumbo. But they all have more extreme top and more extreme bottom than anybody else's, parlor or jumbo, right? Like my parlor, you can record it like a Dreadnought because it has a full, frequency spectrum. It just depends on where you mic it up. But it puts the top in phase, right? So all that comb filtering is because there's parts of the top that are vibrating up when other parts are vibrating down.
Man, that's crazy.
And so in my case, like the most of the top, it's going up and down as a unit. And so you play it really softly, and it has this, really brilliant treble, like a very underbraced guitar. And you can still keep hitting it harder and harder and harder until you're playing it as hard as you can, and it just gets louder and louder and sounds bigger and bigger. So, it finger picks like an underbraced guitar. It strums like like a healthily braced guitar, and if you bang on it, it plays like those guilds that are made like a piano. You know what I mean? It's just, it can take it all the way up because it uses the string tension to sort of self-control, right?
That's cool, man.
Yeah, I hope so. But I mean, because an acoustic guitar is like a speaker cabinet with one of the speakers out of phase. I mean, that's what it's like. The area behind the bridge is up while the area in front of the bridge is down, and vice versa. So the sound you get is still a convolution of the whole thing. You have the box, you have everything. There's audio that resonates off of the neck and fingerboard. So you're still a combination of all of those things, but there's a lot of phase anomalies that go into making up what an acoustic guitar sounds like when you're sitting out 5 feet in front of it. So you could be 30. When you're 30 feet away from a Martin, it sounds like it's a football field away, because the information is just it's convoluting in the air, right? And then on my guitars, I'm you could stand 30 feet away, it sounds kind of the same because it's pushing through the air,
Wow.
Phase aligned, right?
That's cool.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is just, some of it's carnival tricks, like some of it's like, wow, look at that. But really, at the end of the day, you pick up the guitar, you play it, you go, this, okay, I can make songs on this,
Yeah, and you were saying with regard to the Martins, 30 feet away, it sounds like a football field away. Now, I don't know what this particular one sounded like 30 feet away that I was able to pick up, but a friend of mine had handed me one of the Clapton Martins, and I don't know what they do to those guitars. I don't know how his is made and what they've copied.
Yeah. 2
chords in, it sounded exactly like Clapton's guitar. It was the strangest thing. It's like, I could pick up a Strat and it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to sound like Clapton,
Yes.
or a 335 early Clapton, but
yes.
You strum 2 chords on it. It's like, damn. It sounds like Eric on the acoustic. It was so much easier to sound like him on that acoustic than any other damn instrument. What?
Yes.
Why? I mean.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing you have to consider is the acoustic guitar is the guitar, the pickups, the cable, the head, the speaker cabinet, the pedal board. All of those things are in one. Right. So by the time, the information leaves that acoustic guitar 2 feet in front of it, that's the whole recipe, literally. You're bringing only one thing to the table. Whereas if you say, can I pick up a Strat and sound like Jimi Hendrix? Well, not if I'm playing through, a Mesa, dual rectifier. I don't, What if I have that through a germanium fuzz, through this Marshall, through that kind of coily chord, right? So knock the resonant peak of the pickups down. You put all those things together. Now can I sound like Jimi Hendrix? Well, you still got to bring the fingers. But, at the end of the signal chain, as the speaker puts the information into the air, you've got everything covered. And that's how it is on the acoustic, That thing's putting the information right into the air.
Yeah, I never really thought about it that way. Like all those pieces are all the electronic pieces, just acoustic.
Right.
That's crazy.
It's everything.
Now, you don't have to have the traditional pin, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, with me, you just drop the string in, and that's kind of a secondary, benefit, but it's not. You just drop the string in and it hooks, but the string has to go into the body that way in order to put that negative torque into there.
Yeah,
it's all part of the arrangement.
Now, what I did, because I'm the laziest person on the world and I don't like pulling those pins, I used a product called Power Pins, which are those.
Yes.
And we met that guy at NAMM, and he sold them to me. And
yes, he did.
It took me years. I put them on, and I was like, "Oh my God, what a difference!" I mean, it really, and it makes it very easy for me to change strings. So when I look at your guitar, I go, "Well, ultimate lazy guy right here." Yeah, right. Now you don't have to worry about those pins anymore.
Yes,
and that's all I see.
Yeah, I apologize that the guitar sounds really good too, but this will totally make your life easier.
Wow,
I like that.
Those damn unexpected benefits.
I know, man. Yeah, I mean, if there was a simpler way to do it, I would do it. If there was a more difficult way that sounded better, I would do that. But this just seems, the whole thing is integrated. It's designed. There's like these little inserts in there that grab the string, but it's super easy to restring. You got to kind of hold some tension on the string when you string it.
Sure.
Otherwise, if you let go, you're like, well, now it just slipped out the other side. But other than that, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's like anything. If you have a stop tail on your guitar, you better hold it, or else it'll go dinging across the top.
Yeah, exactly. So these aren't really, things, but
so I have a couple questions. I see all your scale links. What's the radius of the fingerboard that you offer for?
Well,
these?
it's compounded, but I have a fretboard profile that I've sort of honed in over the years, and it is it's going to start on the acoustics. It'll start around 15. And, maybe it's going to end up around 20. But what's happening is it's because acoustics are pretty flat anyway. There's a lot of acoustics where they just have a straight 20. But what I do is as you go up, it stays more uniform. In other words, if it's starting at a 15, it stays closer to a 15 until you approach like the 10th fret. So a lot of that compounding is happening much more as you get towards the top, but then the flattening of it is not necessarily uniform. So it is not as though you drew the conical shape and then dissected it.
Okay.
What happens, and this is much more beneficial on an electric where you do a lot of bending, but I do a thing where I'll begin to flatten sort of where the B string is, if you can picture it in your mind's eye, sort of between the B and the G string around the 10th fret. If you park one dot there and then you connect it to the end of the fretboard on the bass side and the end of the fretboard on the treble side, that makes a triangle.
So it's a little symmetrical.
It's asymmetrical, yeah. So the compounding is a bit of an aerofoil. It's a little bit asymmetrical as far as the compounding goes. And then in conjunction with that, there's a little fall away, because as the guitar, has strings on it over the years, the neck, will kind of pull up a little bit. And so you've seen this on on a Fender bolt neck, even on some glue neck, you get the diving board effect at the end of the board. So we put a little fall away in there to mitigate that, but also because as you get up really high, you don't really care that you have like literally 3,000, lower of a fret at the end than you did at the 19th fret. Nobody perceives that.
So you're not,
but it gets every fret out of the way of the other fret. You know what I mean? You bend up. I can get lower action, and you can bend and not fret out, that kind of stuff.
And are you doing a traditional dovetail joint, or is it an extended? Yeah. So you're not doing.
No, it's all a hand fit dovetail.
Okay, so you're not doing the bolt.
I'm not.
Okay, so are you susceptible to that 14th fret hump, or is that?
No, because I pre-build stress into the braces over in that area. So what happens is, it's also a sort of a testimonial to the bridge design in a way, because if the bridge isn't torquing forward on the top, it's also not tugging down, for lack of a better word. I know that's not the physics term here, but it's also not tugging down on the sound hole area.
Gotcha. So that would drop the fingerboard.
That drops the fingerboard at the end as well, right? So if you have a good solid neck area with regard to your bracing, and there's some tension, like I said, there's a little bit of a dome built into the X brace, not behind the X, but in front of the X.
Okay.
So if there's a little doming built into the X at the same time, then the spruce top will rise to meet the board.
Nice.
And then when you level everything off before you before you fret it. In other words, the fretboard is leveled after it's on the guitar. I know some people want to build a neck, put frets into the neck like a Fender Strat, and then put that neck onto the acoustic guitar. I don't do that. But if somebody says, well, geez, dovetail necks are hard to reset, well, you're not going to have to reset mine, because half of the reason you got to reset a dovetail is because the bridge caved.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like it's not even the neck's fault. It's what's happening behind it, and you're doing a neck reset, to compensate for that.
Yeah. So, it's like if you had, your door on your house, the door really doesn't change its square, but the square around it can.
Exactly.
So then you got a racked door, and you're like, well, we got to do something to the door, and it's like,
I got to shave. No, I got to shave off the door. Yeah, exactly.
Or you could fix the hole it's in.
Right. That's
so
exactly right.
Yeah.
3-inch drywall screws instead of the hinges.
Exactly.
Drive them in all the way to the frame. Done. Right.
So you're hand building these one at a time, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I have a CNC.
Okay.
I've got the whole 9 yards, the paint booth and all the stuff. We all know that CNCs don't make guitars, right? So, with my stuff, my CNC stuff is more often than not, my CNC stuff is getting the bulk of the wood out of the way so I can finish by hand. There are some times like obviously the pieces that go inside the bridge that hold the strings, that's a precision operation. Those little inserts are, everything's perfect as it comes off the machine.
Yeah.
But when it comes to a neck or something, all the necks are hand finished and hand carved and stuff like that.
Cool.
The hollow bodies, I don't know if you saw those on the site,
Yes.
but the hollow bodies, those are CNC tops and backs. And I hand carved the original, had it 3D scanned, and then I get my top and my back plate. And the insides are pretty perfect. They don't really require much sanding at all. But then, of course, the outside surfaces do.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of blending. Excuse me. And then there's final contouring where I can shape the voice of the top. But the other thing the CNC does for me is, if I want to make a jazz box, like a little mini jazz box, I can, with a spruce top, I can just change the tool offset. Now I have a top that's 60 thousandths thicker than the other one. The carve is the same. Everything else is identical. I've just thickened up that top, and I can thin it out for maple. Or if somebody says I want one that doesn't feed back as much, great. I'll add another 50 thousandths to it.
That's cool, man.
Yeah, so it's really a fun time for if you're able to blend the two. There's some guys who design guitars in cartoon form and then press start, and I have respect for that. I don't diss that, right? It's a methodology, and Steve Jobs didn't hand carve the iPhone case, right? No. So he's not sitting there with a pocket knife. So there, I definitely have respect for designing guitars that way. That's not how I came up. I take a butter knife to the piece of wood, and at the end of the week, I got something that looks like a guitar.
Well, let's put it in perspective, right? Bob Taylor doesn't get out of bed without a CNC machine picking him up and moving him somewhere. God bless Bob Taylor because he's an innovator, but it's true. The guy...
He's an innovator in a different way. He is an innovator in the Leo Fender model, which is to say I will create the machinery and design this product so that it's repeatable. And I like I said, I have to respect it.
You pick up any Taylor anywhere and you go, I know what this feels like. Because that's right. They're made exactly the same, precise, all the way down the line. And his shop is completely state of the art, right?
Yep.
But then you got some of these guys that are very, very high end. And, they build one guitar every year and a half.
Right.
And it's that piece of wood that went down the Mississippi 200 years ago. Right. And they tap tune, and it's a whole different world. And you got everything in between there.
No, you do. And that's the key. The key is to try to blend those. And at least for me, otherwise why am I doing it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The key is to bring that stuff together. Hand-selected woods. I'm carving it, carve a neck by hand, which means that I don't the CNC doesn't throw a chunk off that I have to sand. You know what I mean? It's like I'm dialing everything in, at the end. The dovetail neck joints are hand fit, which means I'm taking a chisel and scraping it across the piece of mahogany, until it fits right. But it's not to say, there's room for more automation in what I do. That just requires capital.
Yeah.
But there's never, my vision is then to never become the press the start button guitar, right? That's just not.
They kind of lose. They kind of lose a little life to me because, with it. And look, I'm not knocking Taylor, but I'll use them because they're a huge company and they do make a really good, pristine product. But
and hopefully you can walk into a store and know what you're going to get.
Exactly.
No, you do. The list of pros on this pro side, of insane. Taylor are huge. They're huge.
But here's the secret that a lot of people don't know. When they do acquire that Taylor guitar, the roadie gets to play it for a year and a half because they have to break it in.
Right.
And they want his sweat on it. They want his, all of his funk. And in that way, when they get it, after it's been played for a year and a half, it's got that
feels
thing.
Like a friend. Yeah.
It's got that thing, Jeff, that we always talk about.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
The molecules have started lining in the correct way, and now it starts sounding better. And
they all do change.
Look, that's really what happens with CNC guitars. They really do kind of all sound the same because they're all made exactly the same.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. I mean, I can look at a piece of wood. When I'm making a neck, for example, I have a lot of 2-piece necks that are split down the center. So I take a flat sawn piece of wood, I cut it in half, and I flip it. So now I have 2 quarter sawn pieces with a join in the middle.
Yep.
But I don't just put them together. In other words, it's not. I don't deal in rectangles, right? I sight down the board, and if the grain is running just a little dog leg to the left or whatever, then I'm going to bring those pieces, like I'll cut into that piece again, so that the two, the left and right side of the neck, the treble and bass side, the grain is running straight, right?
Sweet.
But then as far as the quartering is concerned, here's where it gets a lot of fun. If you quarter a board, and then both pieces are angled sort of to the left or to the right.
Yeah.
Well, I invert one so that the one's angled to the left, the bass side is angled to the right. So I have this V shape, and that means that now I have this piece of wood, this neck, where then anything that the treble side does, the bass side will do the exact opposite of it. And this is just inherent in the piece of wood, right? And there's almost no way to institutionalize that. You cannot say, press the button for that.
No.
You just it can't be done. I mean, you can train a person all day. I could say, hey guy, you're not $13 an hour anymore. You're $25 an hour, and that means that you learned how to look at this piece of wood and do the thing I said about it, right?
Wow.
But you can't say, if you can't be in a high production factory. To them it's wood. The box, it's a white box that says wood on the outside of it. You know what I mean, in black letters, and they're cutting it into rectangles. Yeah. And you can almost go as far to say I want quarter sawn instead of flat sawn, but even then there's degrees. So like I said, if you have a quarter sawn piece of wood that's on a 30-degree pitch, then it's a 30-degree pitch. But if I rip it the way I do, I have 30 degrees on the treble and I have the negative 30 on the bass.
That's crazy, man. That is so cool.
And it's just that's the kind of fun.
And wasn't that Leo that did that with GNL? They did the bi-cut?
So he did similar thing. He ripped it open for the same reasons now. He ripped it open to let the tension out. And that's the other thing that happens when you rip it open. But so he would just take a piece, rip it open, and then if you wait a couple of days, both of them are serpentine. You know what I mean? Because there's tension that's inherent in just from the run out in the wood.
Yeah.
So he would rip it open, leave it, and then surface it again and bring them together. And of course, he put the truss rod channel in at the same time.
It was called the bi-cut, right?
Bi-cut neck construction, which was great. And then when you look down that one, you don't really see. Sometimes you see a joint, sometimes you don't. Depends on how much wood they had to remove from the blade, and then in reprofiling it. But that was his design. But it didn't make the treble side do a different thing from the bass side. What he did was just to let the tension escape. And so that's the other benefit, is that when I take these two pieces of wood and I put them together, you don't just put them through a thickness sander, because a thickness sander will make it a uniform thickness, but it won't take out a mild C cup, for example, like a cupping shape, right? It won't do that because it flattens it with the rollers as it's going through the thing.
Yeah.
So instead, I got to take it up to the edge sander with a platen that I know is flat within a couple thousandths, and then I sort of true it before I bring the two pieces together.
That's so cool.
Because you can use a clamp, right? Because what's the alternative? Like, just clamp it harder. Well, then there's tension in the joint. Come on, man.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, but that's all the kind of fun stuff. So I do that on the hollow bodies. We do some multi-lam necks on the acoustics, and then there's a solid body that's coming up that has the 2-piece necks like that. And that's a bridge design that leverages this, intention patent, but it's doing it for like a Les Paul Jr. style guitar. So I'm making these solids where you don't see it. You just see it like a wraparound bridge. And I'm having Schroeder. You guys know Jason Schroeder? Guitars?
Sure. He's been on our show twice.
That's fantastic. I gotta go listen to it. So his bridges, right?
Yeah.
He makes these awesome bridges. So I had him do it. I said, here, I'm gonna use your bridge on top, but you got to cut these slots. You gave him drawings stuff. He's got to have slots that go underneath it, and then there's this little piece that drops in the body. So when you string up the guitar, it hooks into a piece that's in the body. That piece puts back pressure against the two anchors that are holding the wraparound bridge, because the wraparound bridge wants to torque forward, right?
Yeah.
And so if you look at a junior, little SGs or whatever, it's like the ones from the 60s sound amazing, right? But what if you don't have that tree and you don't have 50 years to wait? So how do you get more drive out of that motor? Well, you want to phase align the way that the wraparound bridge puts the vibrations into the body.
That's badass.
So, so you string. So it's it's fun. And they're coming through paint like right now. The new solids are coming out.
Nice.
Like right now.
So and so you're putting reverse. Okay, so between the two studs, you're putting reverse tension. It's pulling towards the away from the pickups.
Yeah.
Then it comes up and over, and then it's pulling back towards the nut. So you're getting that tug of war that's going on there, and I guess that is so crazy.
So now the wraparound tailpiece itself, instead of this motor that is toggling back and forth on the torque moment, now it's the up and down motor or the center out motor, right? So you're driving the body, and so you're driving the body in that way where, like I said, with sound pressure level, you sit 2 feet in front of your 1x12 combo, and there's a difference between that guitar that just sings with the amp, in tandem, or the one that's just kind of like dead and lifeless, and the amp's doing its thing, but the guitar's not doing you any favors.
Right.
Wow. And we've all played those guitars, and then you say, what's the answer? I don't know, 48 years and smoke and beer in a bar, is
it's that roadie again playing your guitar.
Yeah,
chicken grease.
Exactly.
Chicken grease.
I don't want to wait that long. I don't want to wait that long.
We've all, you've been talking about bridges a lot and everything. Let's go to the other side. Tuners, do you find they make a huge difference, and more so on acoustic or electric and vice versa? And what do you use for those?
Yeah, so tuner is it's a simple weight. It's like a weight, it's like a density algorithm. You know what I mean? It's if you have heavier tuners, they can shunt the vibrations of the headstock, so that means the headstock's not as flappy. But if you have heavy tuners on a gigantic headstock like a Guild, then it can almost go the other way, right? So I like sort of a lighter weight open back tuner because I just don't want, I don't know. My headstock is also not that large. I have the relatively straight string pull where my headstock tapers at the end of it, it doesn't fan out and flare out.
We'll have pictures, by the way.
All right.
Yeah, on the website.
So it's an efficient headstock, let's call it that, right? With regard to the communication feedback loop that's happening between the strings and the neck and everything, it's an efficiently shaped headstock, and there's a little volute on the back as well, so it's not flappy. And so then I just want to take weight away because I don't want the guitar to be neck heavy. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where I land, on tuners, is I'll take less weight instead of more weight, generally speaking. And then yet there are some guitars that just sound better with, heavy, tuners on the end of it, because it kind of locks the headstock into place. And there was all those products like Fat Fingers and stuff like that, those little brass clips you'd put on the headstock.
Fat heads.
Fat heads. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. There was all that stuff, we all know that has an effect on it, but to me, it's a simple weight recipe. You hold those 6 tuners in your hand, you feel how heavy they are, and that tells you so much more than anything else, like whether or not, whether or not this alloy was used for something or whatever. To me, it's like I said, 90% of that recipe is the weight.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But it's different on an acoustic too, because on an acoustic, your desire is to move the body. You want to make the body the most efficient speaker cabinet. And so a stiffer neck, a neck that loses less vibration and can efficiently allow the strings to continue to vibrate, is better for that, because then it gives you more energy to drive the body end. On an electric guitar, sometimes that loss of sustain in the neck is just as much a part of that recipe. A big old, jazz bass headstock flapping in the breeze is part of what makes that sound the way it does. If you turn that into a headless, it's not a jazz bass anymore.
Right. Right.
So in some cases, you want a neck on a solid body. You do want a neck to sort of give and take and play with you. Whereas on an acoustic, oftentimes, if you're going to err on one side, you're going to err on the side that says, I want to give more vibrations to this body than I want absorbed by this neck.
On the neck, right.
That's pretty crazy, man.
Yeah.
A lot of science. I love it.
A lot of physics. A lot of physics.
It
Love
is. It is. It is
cool.
a lot of physics. Yeah. And like I said, that's the fun part is you'll talk to people who, have their degrees in physics, and even they got to sit and do the math for a minute. Like my aerospace engineer buddy did all the math on the Intention Bridge. And at the end of the day, he's like, yep. You know what I mean? He goes, that's it. You're right. And if you
just
move
never
this,
thought
this
about
happens.
it
If you
that
move
way.
this, yeah. Well, he's not a guitar designer, right? So he's just a friend of mine. So he didn't come at it with baggage, right? But you're right. If you had some guy who's been making guitars his whole life and you go to try to tell him, look, because this happens, right? I mean, we all have the internet. And so, you'll hear it. Sometimes you'll hear people, they'll say, there's no way Frank's design can work the way he says because I can't make sense of it. You know what I mean? Like like one guy took it to the extent where he goes, no, he's created two separate torque moments, one that is, against the other one. One's here, one's there. And then I'm thinking, like, how long do I wait before I tell him, do you realize they're connected by the bridge plate, right? Like the spruce top of the guitar is, you're pretty stiff right there. You know what I mean? Like two torque moments means a cancellation. Now, if the guitar top was made out of rubber, you'd be right. I'd have an S curve in the guitar top, but but it's not. These two things are locked into one another.
That's
right?
so cool. Let's talk frets for a second. It looks like you run like a medium jumbo. Am I correct?
I do. Yeah, it's like
Which
a 47 tall, maybe 98 wide.
Now
that's a sweet spot.
That's usually that's a little extreme for an acoustic because most of the acoustic stuff is thinner,
high for an acoustic.
Right?
Yeah, it's high for an acoustic. Now, it's only 98 wide. The width is fine, but a lot of acoustics will be down in the lower 40s. And for me, you don't pick up on it. 47.047 tall. Yeah, exactly. But I'm saying it doesn't feel weird, right?
Uh-huh.
What I usually tell other guitar makers or people who are asking is, like at 0.047, right, at 47 thousandths high fret, doesn't feel too high to anybody, and it doesn't feel too low to anybody. And so that's if you want, if you're looking for the least offensive, fret size, that's what it is, And so Steve Vai uses it on some gems, and they call it a 6105. They mean Warmoth's 6105 when they call it that, mind you. There's because the number 6105 from Dunlop is different. It's 55 thousandths tall. It's huge. And 98 thousandths wide. But yeah, so on these acoustics, it's pretty much. It feels just right. I've never handed it to anybody who said the fret's too tall.
Are you using Dunlop wire or who's your?
No, I use Jesscar.
Jesscar's the shit, man. Those guys are awesome. That's what Jeff. That's what your guitar has. That Les Paul that I traded.
The black Les Paul. Yeah, the black one.
Yeah. No, those things are railroad ties on your guitar because I got jumbos. but that's a great company. They're just a little bit harder than nickel. But they're not as hard as stainless.
Stainless, right.
And you don't have to go buy a new set of tools every time you go to cut them. Yeah.
Yeah, I just did a stainless for a guy, a custom build, and he wanted stainless, and it's a trip. I mean, I don't mind doing it. I don't have I don't go into full panic mode like some of these guys, but it's a lot more. It's a lot more work.
Yeah. I had the pleasure to cut all three, and I was like, man, I would be doing these Dunlops all day long if I had to do this every day.
Oh yeah, cutting the ends, just cutting it, the amount of hand strength, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's you gotta.
And then there's a whole other argument about that. I mean,
I know.
Okay,
so you want to hear it?
Yeah, sure.
Here we go. Okay, so stainless steel frets on an electric guitar, plugged in, not really a big deal. Okay, here's the thing that they all say, oh, I can hear the clanky sound. It sounds brighter. That's the sound of the string clanking off at the top of the frets when you first hit it, right? Because you heard the string wants to vibrate larger than the fret, governing it, and it clanks against the strings and it settles in after the transient into some smaller vibration pattern. So the clank sound is a very real thing. It is very high up in treble. You don't really hear it that much, like I said, on a plugged-in electric. It's not really a thing. So I say if you need wear and tear, resistance, just do the stainless and don't worry about it. Don't get all cut up in the cork sniffing thing or whatever. But it is that clang, and what I've done to even prove this out is I've done partials. So on an acoustic, I don't like it on an acoustic. I didn't make it standard on my acoustics. I will talk somebody off the ledge often if they come at me with stainless for an acoustics, but I don't want to refret them either. So you do have a lot of these ham-fisted acoustic guys with their 13 to 56 strings, and they will dent up the frets very early in the guitar's life, and you don't want to do a refret unless you have to. So then I'll do the partials. So if you put in stainless steel up to like fret 7 in that high traffic area, what happens is you strike the strings, they do their clank against all the nickel silver ones, and you don't have this sonic difference that you would have if the guitar had all stainless. And if somebody wants to say, because you'll hear another like, well, it's a vibration transfer. No, it's not. The difference between stainless and the nickel silver, you squeezing the string down, that like how that fret drives the audio into the rosewood or the fingerboard, that is insignificant. So that to me is a nothing. And you can even prove that out with the partial refrets, because when I fret one, the last one that's stainless, I fret that one, and then I move up one fret to the nickel one, and then I'm moving up to the second nickel one. There's no difference in that regard at all.
That's cool.
The fret itself doesn't bring the information into the fingerboard any differently. But yeah, it does definitely make a different sound when the strings clink against them.
Right, in the attack, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, there you go.
Cool.
See?
Wow.
Now everybody, you
That's
got your
answer. That's a lot
answer.
of information today. That is a lot of information today.
Oh man, hit me. Whatever else you got.
Well, I have one last question. Obviously,
yeah.
Does the fingerboard make a tonal difference? Because we've heard that maple is brighter and ebony is brighter, rosewood is a little darker. Yeah. So that is the rule, right?
Of course you can't say that it doesn't, right? I mean,
we have a lot of people that do.
Some people that do.
Okay, well, let's give them my email. But no, so what it is there's reflective properties, which means from the transient you have this reflection that is on the strings. Again, it's going to be more important when there's SPL coming from an amp than it is if you're in headphones and a modeler. But everything affects everything else, right? It's a vibration transfer. So you hold the strings down against this certain piece of wood, and I won't do it now because I don't know if it'll even work on this camera, microphone, but I can take fretboards, I can bounce them on the ground, and you can hear a distinct difference in how they ping and ring out. Oh yeah. And there's a customer, I was talking to a customer of mine, Richard, and we were choosing his board over FaceTime, right? Look at this piece, look at that piece, right? And so I started clanging these things for him, and it was obviously, that could help, because we've ended up on a certain piece of ebony that we used, and nice chocolate streaks in it. I digress. But so then I go, oh yeah, by the way, here's a sample I got of Rich Light, and you drop that stuff on the floor and it's just thud, and I say that while still being an advocate for Rich Light. In other words, if you want a fretboard material that does not move, if you want a fretboard material that is durable, that is this or whatever, there's a lot of other reasons why I would still tell somebody, yeah, you should use Rich Light. So I'm not knocking it, but I'm saying you cannot sit there and tell me that these differentials, these deltas, are inert when it comes to the plug-in tone. They're just not, And like I said, it's all in the information it gives back to the strings. Yeah. So a stiff neck, you could argue that I can take a warm wood like rosewood and stiffen up the neck with titanium rods, and all of a sudden the neck in its totality now behaves more like an ebony fretboarded neck. You could make a case for something like that. You know what I mean? Like I can do things to erase some of the deltas, between fretboard material. But you can't tell me that if I do nothing different that it doesn't change. Gibson had a pretty tough time selling baked maple fretboarded Les Pauls.
Yeah, they did.
And at least half of that is because people hear with their eyes, but you could play the guitars. You know what I mean? That's where the discussion ends. I picked the guitar up. I played it. It was different. I mean, it's really simple. It's really simple.
And that's saying necks don't have any difference in the tone is like saying that the wood in a speaker cabinet doesn't change the sound of a speaker cabinet.
Right, because how could it? It's a rigid box, and the speaker cone is what's moving back and forth. So what are you talking about? What do you mean a solid pine sounds different than 12-ply birch?
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. Listen to our last show because Mark Bartell just reinvented the cabinet.
I know. So that's what made me send you guys the thing. So I work with Mark a little bit. I work with Boutique Amps Distribution. They do some. They handle my guitars, and I did some design work. Yeah, I did some like 65 amps. We did some germanium fuzz pedals and stuff. And I'm working on the Tone King transition. So when Boutique bought Tone King from Premier Builders Guild, he hit me up. He said, "Hey, you want to help me out? Making this thing work, right? Getting it into production. Working through the transition." So I'm talking to Mark all the time about stuff. About his amps, and I love what he's doing. When he's that's, you got to think like that. Making those baffles like that. But yeah, so I'm kind of you can draw a dotted line. Between those. Yeah, between those. It's just recently, like I said, it's not like we didn't go to high school together, but right. But talk about a smart guy. And he combines everything. He's smart. And he's, creative, and he's inventive. He puts all that stuff together.
He's got that left and right side that most people don't have. You have one or the other, but he's got both. Now, just to put all my metal friends at ease.
Yes.
You don't have to worry when you're plugging in through your angle. You could run a piece of Bakelite with some strings, and there's not going to be any tonal difference because, the amp is just making a noise. And that's all it is.
I've said for years, once it got up into the real high gain stuff, the guitar's nothing but a trigger.
You can make it out of an aluminum rod, and it's going to sound
here's the funny part. So let me try to bring that home, right? So I did, so I'm like I said, the other thing I did when I left Duncan was took this technology to Fishman that became the Fluence pickups, right? And so awesome. I voice all these pickups with the artists, and we're doing this, all these things that basically I guess what's the word? They demystified all of the secrets, all of the things that you thought you knew about pickups up until that point. Meaning you could say, well, I think this or I think that, and then because the Fluence coil is so perfect in its delivery, you could prove that stuff out. Meaning there's people who say Alnico and ceramic don't sound any different. The reason they sound different is because there's a difference in the Gauss strength, but outside of that, it's not doing anything different. Now, the pickup maker says, no, you're wrong because it affects the inductance. So an Alnico has a higher inductance. Well, that's going to change the sound. All right, well, what if I used ceramic and I stuck a piece of steel somewhere in there creatively to bring the inductance up? Now, do they sound the same? No, they don't sound the same. They disturb differently. The fields disturb differently, even if the Gauss strength is the same. And the Fluence core is able to teach that by having none of the other baggage associated with it when I go ahead and swap one for the other, because it's pretty much deaf to inductance shifts, because the resonant peak frequency of one coil is like 80 kilohertz. It's out of, it's off the charts.
Right.
Yeah, so it doesn't have anything to do with it. So, what became, what's shocking, if you want to call it that, whether I'm doing the pickups like we just did Tosin recently, he's got a signature set.
Oh, nice.
Devin Townsend, Steph Carpenter. I could be at Tosin's house, and we did the bulk of the early testing, like the voicing session. The bulk of it was through the Axe effects because he had everything dialed in, and he could scroll through a multitude of different things, right? Different tones.
Sure.
And the differences that I would make, like the sub 1 dB shifts that I would make, even through like incredibly high gain, they do have an impact on the sound. Like you could still hear them through all the gain. Now, part of that is because of the clarity and the phase alignment of the Fluence coil. In other words, if I made a half a dB shift at 400 hertz on a passive pickup by laying a parametric boost over the front of it, that could be completely lost and homogenized. But when you have the sound hitting the amp in such a phase aligned manner, like it's all immediate, all the frequencies are hitting at once, there's no group delays. It means everything that you do, it winds up making it out the other side of the gain stack. And so we were playing through incredibly high gain stuff, but like I said, you make this one little shift and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I can hear it. I can tell, the difference between those two things. So normally I would agree with you. By the time you get up to that point where it sounds like a video game, you're right. It doesn't matter what you do up front. Like you said, the guitar is a trigger, and half of it isn't even half of it's not even the fundamental. It's just the paper shredding sound, that white noise across the top, that, depending on how you set the triple rectifier, you're either mitigating it or it's all white noise. You think somebody left the TV on after midnight.
Yeah. I mean, I bust balls, and, when it comes to that stuff. But when it comes to the Fluence thing, I'm blown away. I don't know about you, Jeff, but that he's involved with it, because it brings it so much around for us, because we interviewed Richie, we interviewed Greg Kalk, and we interviewed Greg Mara, who's our who's our guy. And we got to see the demonstration. It was one of those things that we had not seen the demonstration, and we went to NAMM, and Greg was up there, Greg Kalk, and we were like, holy crap. I mean, it was just amazing, and how true to life it is, and it's it's a circuit board with these crazy windings, and it's just insane, man. I mean, that they really did reinvent the pickup.
It's the most innovative thing that I've seen
since the first
in quite a while when it comes to pickup design. It's completely different.
Hey, look, there's other companies out there that make active pickups, but they're nowhere in that neighborhood.
Right.
Yeah, that's the thing. An active, I mean, we hate the term active because it just means something different. These pickups do a thing, and to do that thing, they require power.
Yeah.
And that's about where the similarities end. Guess what happens? Every pickup you own is an active pickup. The second it hits whatever the next thing is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, by the time you hit your $200 buffer that's on the front end of your board, you just became, a buffered active signal. So,
right.
That you have to sort of take the stigma away. But every other active pickup, at least to date, right, they're using preamps that clip, either hard or soft, or they clip. Some of them have higher headroom than others, but that's the first problem. Well, we don't have that problem, so we have a complete and free and open transient, from the signal. So we're not clipping. In fact, one of Devin's two voices on his pickups has some clipping in it because he liked it from the EMGs. It was a thing that he liked about the pickups that he'd used in the past. Otherwise, we're talking about preamps that are not clipping. So the signal as it leaves the guitar is as wide open as any passive pickup that you could ever play, right? It's got the highest voltage swing to swing. And so the other thing is these active pickups are made with normal coils. That means that the coil has a staunch resonant peak in it. Then they smash the resonant peak down with resistive loading, so it becomes more flat.
More flat, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like if you had 20, let's say you had 25 or 50K pickups in your guitar, pots in your guitar. Like how lousy would that sound, right? If you had 25K pots in your Les Paul. But that's what they're starting with, right? So they're starting by smashing the resonance from the coil, flattening it out, and then boosting the stuff they want to boost.
Right.
And those different layers, they add all of their own phase incoherencies. They add all of their own, byproducts, including the headroom issue. But by the time you come out the other side, like I said, you've exacerbated the group delay. There's additional. Now I use terms like lateness. I'm not talking about latency, but I'm talking about a drag. Like all the resistive loading is just basically a drag on the electrons. It's making things happen more slowly and less efficiently. Now, if you put that on a scope, you're not going to see the timeline that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a millisecond of delay that'll show up, in your Pro Tools rig. I'm talking about way, way down in the nanoseconds. But what happens is after a gain stack, after like a couple of cascading gain stages, that is what turns the harmonic content, like all the extended harmonics, that's what makes it turns it all into mush. Is because this stuff is not going through the amp, at the same time, right? There's a smear. And so by the time everything turns into harmonic multiples, the smear gets smearier. It's like I can take the illustration we use all the time is, I can take a high-def TV, I can put a filter on it so it looks like a 1970s tube television. I can't do the other way around. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I cannot realign group delay at any other point. Much the same as I can't say, you know what, screw it, just put a 57 in front of that cabinet. We'll turn it into a condenser mic later. You can't do it because it's wrong at the source.
With the smear that you're thinking about, I'm just thinking it through right now, and this is getting a little technical, and we probably got to go at some point. But once you start adding harmonic, content to that, second and third order harmonics and things like that, it kind of, in my mind, in essence, would almost double the length of the smear. Because the initial one is still there, but now you're playing with half of the frequency.
Yeah. So
double the frequency, so the smear would be like twice as long, almost.
Right. So you have that, but then you also have like the recovery time of the tube being distorted with a transient. You have all of that stuff as well. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So how quickly does the rest of that amp get in and out of what you just put into it? Right. So any slewing, any like I said, like recovery time, even speaker cone excursion, right? All of that stuff now becomes like that. This is the first time in my life outside of very minuscule advancements in this regard with Zephyr silver wire pickups that we did, where silver wire is like 6% more conductive than copper. So you get basically like a 6% bump in efficiency. But this is the first time when I've ever been able to work with something where it just blows the doors off of it. And that's where I'm saying, like, you're on the other side of something with of an amp that's clipping at 100 dB a gain, and you can tell the difference I make, on the front end with the Fluence pickups, when I'm doing a voicing, session, I can come in with basically, the twiddle of a gnat's wing somewhere, at 8K, and you go, I can hear. Yeah, it is. Because in gain, everything's, you're making sausage, right? Everything is fighting for the same position within, a sausage casing that's too small to hold it all, right? And so it's not even just about the frequencies going in, it's about the relationships between them. So if and that's where you get into discussions where you say, I want more bass. That means you want less treble sometimes. I want more treble. Sometimes that means you want less bass, because you need to take certain frequencies out of the way because they end up fighting for peak position.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I get to play with all that stuff when we're doing Fluence.
Cool.
That's the craziest thing, man.
It's so
now
cool.
I'm hungry as hell. So
yeah, sausage, pizza. We got it all, right?
Yeah, we covered everything. We hit the entire Italian restaurant.
Italian beef. Well, we left out the Italian beef sandwich that you can get in Chicago. That's another tough one to find by you guys. But
wow.
A good Italian beef, sandwich from Chicago. Holy macaroni, you'll never forget it.
There he goes with the food. Jesus.
Exactly.
I know. Sorry.
I'm getting fatter just listening.
Well, cool.
Nice.
I mean, Frank, you said the what was it? The Les Paul Jr. style things were coming out.
Yeah,
of
those
paint
are on
too?
the way. Yeah,
Okay.
there's a single cut and a double cut.
Oh, nice.
Those happen to have P90. So Fluence doesn't have a P90 yet. So on those, I'm making the P90s for them. And I'm doing it a little bit differently. I have a wire, and it all kind of blends together. A lot of the messaging is the same across this stuff. But there's this guy George Cardis, does fantastic work in hi-fi. Sometimes the things that he does will come across like snake oil. In how the hi-fi industry gets, but he is on the science side of snake oil. He is not one of those people who says if you dip this in lamb's blood, then it sounds better.
You mean I shouldn't have $10,000 speaker wire for my stereo?
You could. It's just feeds the economy. I'll say yes, please do. We need the money to start spinning. You know what I mean? We make money when money moves. So yeah, no complaints. And so he's got this wire that I'm winding the pickups with. So you remember I told you like silver wire, 6% more conductive than copper, right? Yeah. And so there's these improvements that you can get in the performance when you do that. But of course, it produced a pickup from Duncan that's $1,200 retail for a set, and. And it's worth it. It's worth it even in its weight, right? There's silver in there. It was cryogenically treated. There's bimetallic pole pieces. They're great pickups. They just happen to cost a lot of money to produce, right? So George has this wire. It's copper, but when he anneals it, it's in a hydrogen environment. And so you ever see those commercials for shampoo where they show the like the dry, brittle hair that's got all these cracks and fissures in it, right? And then they say, if you use our conditioner, your hair is going to look like this. And it's this gorgeous, like, smooth cylinder, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right. All the cracks and voids are filled, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, somehow filled with hair. Yeah, how does it do? Yeah.
Right.
You know, it's impossible, right? But anyway, so when he anneals the wire, so he's got these things on his website. He'll show you, you know, this is what normal copper wire looks like. And it's all fissured. You know, under a microscope, it looks like, you know, that split end hair, right? It's all kind of fissured. And then his wire, after he goes through this annealing process, it's gorgeous and smooth. So that means that the surface, we can talk about skin effect, right? The surface of the wire is cleaner. Yeah. It means I have more copper packed into the same outer diameter. Mm-hmm. So it's denser. So I'm picking up that 6% extra conductivity at least. And so then I've got that wire, and I'm using, happen to also be using 41 gauge instead of 42, which would have been on a vintage PA or PAF and P90s. Yeah. And so the P90s that are going into this, they just sound huge. They're wide and gorgeous, extended, you know, top and bottom, big, bold, you know. That one's going to be a lot of fun. So that's another, you know, deviation.
Are you going to be selling those pickups on their own?
I'm probably not. It doesn't mean I can't or won't, but yeah, the business, you know, this is a, you know, it's a small industry we're in, and we're all friends. You know, everybody's buddies. You know, I do work with Fishman. I make the Fluence pickups. I'm not really interested in sitting down at a pickup pointer all day and making Falbo pickups. It doesn't mean I can't, won't. You know what I mean? But it's you know, there's more productive uses of my time, so I'm happy to make them for the guitars, and that's kind of the plan for right now. Is that you know. Is that these pickups come with a guitar wrapped around them.
Nice.
You know, and probably, honestly, what'll probably happen is when we go, you know, when the day comes that we make Fluence, you know, P90 version Fluence pickups, these will be one of the, you know, the benchmarks. Benchmarks. Yeah, exactly. You know, we'll because that's what we do. We have all these shuttle guitars, and, you know, keep swapping everything in and out. You can hear things in real time. And, you know, all the way back from day one, you know, we had that 54 Strat pickup, and we had all this stuff. You know, it's like, I mean, cripes, I left there with, I have a double cream vintage butyrate bobbin JB from the 70s. It's the JB model, not a JB, right? So this would have been a Seymour wound, and this thing was a holy grail. I mean, everybody who played it was like, what? And so, you know, so I bring it to Boston, you know, I'm like, okay, well, we're not done until we beat this, you know, and sure enough, you know, you take that out and you put in a brand new JB, and this difference was night and day. And some of it's explainable phenomenon, and some of it's not, you know. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that'll probably be what, you know, in other words, when we come out with a Fluence P90, I'll sit there and tell you, don't buy mine. You know what I mean? Like, you want this one. It's noiseless.
You got to pick up
It'll be completely.
You got to pick up the Audley Freed signature model. And everybody will be like, who the hell's Audley Freed?
Right.
I know Audley.
Yeah, Audley's a badass guitar player.
Yeah, totally.
And he uses a lot of P90s these days. So yeah, maybe. Nice. Or Charlie Starr from Blackberry Smoke. He's a big P90 guy.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Mr. Mountain himself.
Yeah, Leslie.
That's right.
Leslie West.
That's right.
There's your endorser, man. You get that guy.
I know.
Well,
sometimes, some of these guys won't. They just, you know, they don't want to put a battery in the guitar, and that's fine because, like I said, you know, the current P90 is not broken. You know, you plug it into the amp and it works. There's some broken things about it. It's super loud and buzzy, and you know, it has a pinched, you know, sort of limited range, if you will. That's not a bad thing, but
that's the characteristic.
Yeah, exactly. So these things aren't, like I said, these things aren't broken, and that's, you know, with Fishman, with Fluence, we didn't say, like, we're not fixing the, you know, these things that we know are broken in a pickup just because it's a pickup design. Like, pickups have resonant peaks. That's not broken. We like that. Nobody wants a flat pickup that doesn't sound like anything. Right. You know,
exactly.
It's the worst. You know, so if we can't beat what, you know, is already the benchmark for excellence, you know, then what are you doing? We didn't come out, you know, Richie have said it too, you know, We didn't come out to say all your guitars for the last 60 years sound wrong.
That's exactly what he said.
Yeah, like you got to, it's only going to sound right from today forward when you put this thing in that sounds different. Like, no. This is about that best version of that best thing that you had on the best day in the best weather, and you know what I mean, with the best amp. I'm going to hand you that on a silver platter every day, all day, across 40 guitars if you want it.
Yeah.
You buy one in Japan, it's the same as the one you bought here. You buy one next year, it's the same as the one you bought a year before.
That's sweet.
You know how much tolerances I had to deal with in my past? When making whining pickups, 10% plus or minus. I mean, that's a cavern, of delta. If you're talking about trying to make something that's repeatable.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So I have to call Greg Kalk up because he thinks that it's I-beams and trusses underneath. He says he thinks it's a bunch of I-beams and trusses that make the sound.
That make them pick up.
So now we gotta. Well, I'll call him up.
Yeah.
I'll say you gotta listen to the show. He explains it.
Yeah, he knows. No, yeah,
of course he does.
Man, I tell you, I mean, I don't know that you need this story to, we're going long here, but that was Greg's pickup session was the Empire Strikes Back of pickup sessions, because we had done everything we needed to do for the humbuckers and the Strats and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And the Strats are a stack design on purpose because the top coil is too perfect. We actually needed like flux chaos to be a Strat, right? And so the parallel wired, stack ended up producing the sound, right? So basically everything we thought we knew from the Strats and the humbuckers, by the time I get there, they've got 10 prototypes laid out for me, just magnet structures, cores, and stuff like that. And we chuck them up into the guitar, and everyone's looking at each other, going, "This isn't Fluence. Like, this isn't doing the thing." And because again, Telly 100% different. There's a cover on the neck pickup. There's a giant metal thing plate around the bridge. There's a base plate on it. There's a magnetic base plate on the bottom of the pickup. So there's all this stuff that makes that recipe different. And so we're all looking at each other, and it's like, holy cow! Like, did the lightning in a bottle just leave the room? Right? What just happened? And of course, it was not that, because you guys have heard those pickups. They're like the most triumphant Telly pickup accomplishment ever. But everything changed throughout the course of 3 days. It was like 3 marathon sessions, and Greg was there the whole time, and it was like, nope, okay, change this thing about the magnet, you need to change this change this coil, blah blah blah. And what we ended up with after 3 days was just, like I said, it was darkest before dawn. Could have been it could have been sort of either we wouldn't have released an average product, but it could have been a head scratcher. And, you just got to keep plowing through it, because the coils are the best thing in the world. And so what it became was all this manipulation of the magnetic field, why a Telecaster does what it does with the magnetic base plates, and all of the above. Mm-hmm. And noise canceling too. So we don't have a bottom coil in the, on the Greg pickups. There's a dummy coil that you can see inside the control cavity, and then that actually kicks out when you're in the middle position.
So cool.
And they hum cancel with each other.
Needed. Yeah, right.
It's not needed. And it wasn't because we RP'd them, right? But then you want to talk about like these feats of strength. Doing the thing you can't do. Like you could. His middle position, Greg's middle positions, is not the same as the bridge and the neck being combined. Meaning, your best Telly middle position, doesn't come from the Telly that has the best sounding bridge pickup or the Telly that has the best sounding neck pickup. The best. When we said, "Oh, that's the best," that is it. We have to do that. That isn't neither of the bridge or neck pickup were pickups that we targeted when we were making the bridge and the neck in isolation. Mm-hmm. You can't do that. You know what I mean? Like
with two discrete pickups, you can't.
Yeah,
right,
you can't.
right.
You cannot.
You can't have the best and the best and the best.
You can't.
Right.
You have to give something up. And so in this case, we had the best neck, the best bridge, and then the best, the best middle. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's true in both settings. The hotter, blackguard setting, and then the twangier white guard setting.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't be happier about how things are playing out over there.
Very cool.
Yeah, man.
At Fishman. So I fly out there every once in a while, So most of my days are Falbo guitars. Tone King I'm working on a lot, lately. But then, like I said, whenever there's a voicing session, I'll fly out there. Sometimes I'll do them remotely. So like Tosin's, we did it at his house, in his studio with all his gear. Mm-hmm. And then back to what I said earlier about his, the Axe effects. So then to confirm all the stuff, that's when we go to the Morgan. Right, that's when we go through the rest of his rig, and then we even went over to Tone Merchants and went through some Friedmans. You know what I mean? And it just proved out everything that we had already done. It wasn't like through one or the other. It didn't work.
Right.
But in the initial voicing of these things, when we were first making the classics, and because we had everything at our fingertips, you could get to a place where you had you were doing something good on the Fender, but you didn't notice that until you would have plugged it into the Marshall. It's crashing out that preamp a little bit on the top end. So it's kind of like when you have everything, when you're spoiled rotten and you have all of the frequency content in front of you, then you better do your due diligence, and go through every single kind of rig, every single kind of an iteration to make sure that you're doing something that
works for everything. That works for everybody. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome,
yeah.
man.
It has.
Wow.
Well,
cool.
We'll have to have Frank on again, man.
I'd be happy to.
I mean, good God, we could talk to you for a half a day.
Yeah, man. Write your questions down, right?
It's
Any
the Frank
mystery
Falbo
pickup
month.
questions, mystery. Yeah.
There you go.
I would be honored. It was.
Cool.
I've had some people like Greg Mara even told me. He's like I said, he's a buddy of mine, and he told me about you guys. It's a great show. So I finally, when I heard Mark do it, I was like, you know what? Let me reach out to these guys. Just like I said, just even clarify some of the stuff that's going on with Tone King. Cool. But no, I'd be happy to do it whenever.
Oh, awesome.
Cool.
Yeah,
excellent. Well, I think we covered a crap load of stuff today.
Lord,
yeah, we killed
my
it.
brain's exploding. So, wow. Well, thank you so much for just giving us all this information. Most people out there, it might be too technical for a lot, but most people out there,
I apologize.
That
all right, man.
Most people out there that want the technical stuff, and we do get the emails, and the PMs. It's like, man, we want a real technical show. Well, you just got it.
Yeah, you did.
And this is stuff that a huge percentage of people don't know anything about. I guarantee you, because a lot of it was surprising for me to hear.
I'm sure we're gonna get flamed like nobody's business, but that's okay. It's any kind of stuff is good.
Yeah. I mean, when I say this stuff, I usually have something to back it up, right? So if the stuff comes in, you guys point me to it or whatever. But if somebody comes in and says, I don't think this is true because of X, Y, and Z, no problem. I'll walk you through it. I'll tell you how we figured it out. We can part as friends if you still don't think so. I mean, one thing I tell people, them, when someone says such X, Y, Z can't make a difference, I always have to stop and I'm like, let me just hold on. It is making a difference. We're not arguing over whether or not it's going to make a difference. The only thing we can discuss is whether you think it's important, or whether you can hear the difference, or whether you think it's worth the extra $50 or $1,000 or $10,000. That's the thing that we can talk about. If you say to me, it doesn't matter if it's baked maple fretboard on that Les Paul, no one cares. No one cares in the first row of the audience. You might be right. By the time you get to the first row, that guy's girlfriend who's reluctantly there to see the band with the guy probably can't tell that you've got a Brazilian rosewood board on your new build.
She doesn't even care.
She doesn't even care.
Of course not.
No, she doesn't care. But all this stuff matters because if it changes the way that you feel when you're holding the instrument, playing your gig or recording your track, then by all means, that's all the difference that was needed. Some people argue too. They say, Weekend Warrior, this guy, he plays. He never plays out. He plays in his basement. And he's not even that good. And he's sitting on $40,000 worth of gear. What do you care what he's sitting on? If the last pedal that he bought for $400 that's hand wired with unicorn horn, for a knob.
Right.
If that last thing made the guy happy, what do you care?
Oh, that's too
funny. Let the guy be happy. Let people be happy. If you want to tell me you want to use, like I said, those $10,000 speaker cables, go ahead.
Yeah,
float your boat, float your boat.
That's right.
God bless you.
That's it. All right. Well, Frank, thank you so very much for all this information. And thanks for digging the show too.
Yeah, man.
No,
thank
I love
you.
it. Yeah, I love it.
Turn your friends onto it, and
I will.
And tell them you're on this week. So
I will. I will.
Very good, man.
All right.
Have yourself a great rest of the evening. And I know we're a few days away, but have a great Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, it should be fun.
And there you have the story, and lots of them.
Woo, man, that was
a lot of technical story there.
Holy moly! And you know what? I apologize because I've been, and so have you. We've been very busy. Both of our jobs have been pulling us 6 ways a Sunday, and I got the contact, and I was like, you know what? Let's get him on. I saw his guitars. I was like, they're pretty cool. They look very neat. And I was like, well, let's just get the guy on. I didn't read any of his back history, and when he started talking about Fluence and working for Seymour, I'm like, what in the hell? I'm like, it blew my mind. And then, of course, it was just like, let him go. Just let him talk.
Father of the P-Rails.
Oh, my God.
Is
that crazy?
That's great.
I tell you what, man,
that's so cool.
And we will have him back on. I'm almost positive of it, but I'm sure he knows some people that we can probably talk to.
Well, probably, but I'm really interested in the junior.
Yeah.
With the P90 that he's only wanting for the junior.
Yeah.
Gonna have to take a look at that. Man.
Yeah, man.
Cool.
I'm telling you what. Wow. Well, we hit a home run today, huh?
Yeah, it was awesome. I hope everybody liked it and it wasn't too technical. The people that wanted technical,
you got it.
You got what you asked for.
That's right.
And, that was a lot of information, so that was very, very cool.
So until next time, my friend.
That's right, because it may not be so technical, but you'll still learn something.
Yeah, I'm Mick Marcelino.
I'm Jeff Bober.
And we're always saying,
onward.
Be sure and follow the show on Twitter @Amps and Axis. Also, make sure you like the show on Facebook. For news, comments, and everything else, visit the webpage ampsandaxiscast.com. Thanks for listening.